It occurred to us that it was about time we heard directly from the articulate young folks who are representative of the youth today. This is why we have scheduled two top teams from the University of California to debate this subject for us here today. Through our good friend Hal Hutchison of Atlantic Richfield, we were indeed fortunate to enlist the help of Dr. Waldo Phelps, chairman of the Department of Speech at UCLA. Dr. Phelps is delayed at UCLA in the midst of some PhD examinations and will be with us just a little later. In the meantime, it is our good fortune to be able to introduce Mrs. Patricia Long, Director of Forensics at UCLA, who will act as moderator at our debate and will introduce the debaters. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to present Mrs. Patricia Long of UCLA.
Gentlemen, on behalf of UCLA, I would like to thank you very much for inviting us here for this debate. Probably it is as unusual for us to debate before a group of gentlemen of your esteem as it is for you to hear us debate. So it's going to be a challenge for both of us, I think, this afternoon. I'd like to introduce to you at this time the topic that will be debated. It will be resolved that America's business corporations offer qualified college graduates and other highly motivated young people a greater opportunity than do non-business careers. We will have two teams from UCLA debating this topic. On the affirmative, supporting the resolution that I have just read to you, will be first speaker, Mr. Alec Wisner of UCLA. Alec, would you like to come up and take your seat on the right here? Mr. Wisner is, for your information, I know it says something about it in the program, a sophomore at UCLA. He debates with our program, has debated all year, and is a major in history. I would like to secondly introduce to you Mr. Elden Rosenthal, who will also uphold this resolution in today's debate. Elden Rosenthal is a senior graduating this June from UCLA. He has been a speech major and is interested in a career in law in the fall. These gentlemen, therefore, will be upholding the affirmative on the resolution. On the negative, arguing basically that non-business careers are more profitable for the qualified college graduate and motivated young people, will be first speaker, Mr. Roy Schultz. Roy is a sophomore from UCLA also, a major in history, who also, all four of these individuals are very prominent in our debate program at UCLA. And the fourth speaker will be Mr. Claude Fisher from UCLA, a senior sociology major going to graduate school in sociology in the fall. First of all, let me explain a little bit about the format to you. I will just introduce the debaters as I have now done, and then I will sit down and the debaters will take over. We will have, first of all, an 8-minute constructive speech by the affirmative. That will be Mr. Wisner, followed by a speech by Mr. Schultz opposing Mr. Wisner. We will then have cross-examination. After each speech, we'll have a 3-minute period of cross-examination. After each speaker has spoken for a period of 8 minutes and been cross-examined, we will then have a brief rebuttal period of 4 minutes each, so that when I sit down then, I will hand the podium to Mr. Wisner, who will take over and start the debate. Thank you very much for inviting us. I hope you enjoy the debate as much as we are going to enjoy putting it on for you. Thank you.
One week ago, Professor David Wilcox, an associate of the Rand Corporation, reminded his political science class, "I want to get together with each of you before the end of the quarter when I'll return to corporate work." At the sound of those two words, corporate work, most of the class began to boo. Many of our fellow students seem alienated by business, and Elden and I fail to see why. We believe that American business offers today's college graduate and other highly motivated young people greater opportunities and challenges than do non-business careers. According to Professor Alexander Heron of Stanford, men are motivated to do something for both themselves and their society. Each man naturally has his own hierarchy of values, some placing more emphasis on themselves, others being more concerned with the world around them. But all men feel some responsibility in both areas. In analyzing business opportunities, then, we will consider both areas: opportunities concerning the individual and opportunities concerning society as a whole. Now, when we consider opportunities for oneself, we'll have to examine what Elden and I feel are the two fundamental components of the best opportunity: the availability of risk and challenge. Both must be present in any good opportunity, and the degree to which they exist determines the degree to which the opportunity will satisfy its taker. Risk is essential because without the possibility of failure, success means nothing. Success is worthless if everybody achieves it. Success means standing out above the crowd. Ambrose Bierce put it well when he defined opportunity as a favorable occasion for grasping a disappointment. But risk must be accompanied by challenge. A person must never feel that he's reached the top. He must always know that he can achieve more. An opportunity is never a dead-end street. Business provides both the risk and challenge so necessary for real opportunity. The risk is omnipresent. Companies don't measure performance on IQ points, but on what those points get down on paper. Not on potential, but on performance. The risk of failure is constant, and the incentive to succeed is great. The challenge of business never ends either. There's only one chairman of the board at General Motors, only one president of Standard Oil. And even if a person actually makes it up to one of those jobs, if that challenge isn't enough, the opportunity to develop new products, to expand the company, still remain to be fulfilled. The challenge never ends in business if the individual is ready to meet the task. No other field can match the opportunity of business. Education is limited. To begin with, not many can earn a doctorate or get a job at a top university. And then, advancement is not based on skill, but on tenure. But assuming the best, what happens to the man who hits his peak at age 30? Well, the risk is gone for him. He isn't about to be fired because his Nobel Prize or whatever he has lends prestige to the school. And challenge? Well, he's reached the top. Actually, that's almost disappointing. The only real challenge remaining for the teacher who is successful is the challenge within himself. There is no more opportunity remaining within his profession. Then, there's government. Our government is actually a business too. But there are significant differences. For one, in corporate business, you can always reach the top. But the only way I'll ever get to the top echelons of government is to run for office or to get a presidential appointment. And that is not what we mean when we think of a career in government. Civil service does provide security and ultimately and significantly stagnation, a far cry from the risk so necessary for the best opportunity. The outlook is very simple. Only business can provide the continuous risk and challenge that makes success so fruitful and constitute the best opportunity. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody should enter business. Lord knows we need professors. What I am saying is that the professor, although he's doing many things, is not taking advantage of a great opportunity. By taking a position with little risk or challenge, he has actually closed the door on opportunity. For self-satisfaction, the opportunities lie with business, both in number and in scope. With that in mind, let's proceed to that other area and examine opportunities to serve society. First, let's talk about direct opportunity. Business provides millions of dollars annually to finance important endeavors. The Ford Foundation finances national educational television. Besides Ford, You have the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Guggenheim Foundation. The security provided by success in business has enabled many individuals to devote their time to public service. Governors Romney and Rockefeller, university presidents Kerr and Hitch, and Vietnam Peace Representative Averill Harriman are just a few of the men who made their fortunes in business and moved on to further careers in public service. Business opened the doors to these further opportunities. The University of California realized business's dedication when it culled industry's ranks for its last two presidents. The President of the United States realized this when he appealed to industry to move into the slums and help out in the war on poverty. Business doesn't have to prove its concern for public welfare. Cold facts have demonstrated that dedication. But let's get more basic. Remember that our entire society is based upon productivity. It takes money to run the government and money to build the schools that professors teach in. And the only sector of our economy with productive capacity is business. For government and education to survive, the productivity of business, which finances them through taxes, is needed. Business is the cornerstone of our economy. Calvin Coolidge, though not remembered for his incisive reasoning, did stumble into the truth on occasion, such as the time when he noted, "The business of America is business." Although perhaps not poetic, it is nonetheless true. All of our other achievements are built on this economic productivity. The best way to serve society is to assure its continued existence. Only business represents that ultimate assurance. Business provides this opportunity to serve society. So far, we've talked about opportunity. Now I want to get down to the most basic issue of all, the place of business in the entire American system. Now, we all know what the primary goal of business is. It's to earn profits. It's strange that some people have used this idea to indict corporate business. I want to point out several things. First, the money made by business represents a public trust. If a company charged prices that were too high, nobody would buy its goods, just as they wouldn't if the merchandise were shoddy or if the marketing practices were unfair. The fact that people buy a company's product indicates faith in that company. And second, keep in mind where that money goes. After paying production costs, salaries, rents, and overhead, the profits go three ways. Some of it goes to expansion. Some goes to pay dividends to the stockholders who deserve some money for their investment. And the rest of it goes to pay taxes that keep our governmental and educational establishments going. Winston Churchill said, "It is an absurd idea that making profits is a vice. I consider the real vice as making losses." No, without the profits of business, there wouldn't be too much money floating around here to pay for other things. And that's the key. That's why the greatest opportunity is with business. Not only can business meet the needs of the individual toward himself and toward his society, but only business can provide the productivity and momentum to keep this nation forging ahead. Without education, without our government, the United States would not be a pleasant place in which to live. But without business, it would be no place at all. Thank you.
Alec, you told us the central goal of business was to make profits, as I'm sure the gentleman out here would agree. Doesn't that motive subsume all of these other social goals of business beneath it?
No, I don't think it does.
Why would a business go into the ghettos then?
Because first, they'll be helping the people there. Second, they'll be satisfying their basic need to serve society. Remember, Professor Heron told you that men are motivated to serve society. And third, at the same time, they'll make profit, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. You don't believe that the first two, however, are less important to most businessmen than is the third.
No, I don't think so.
All right. You talk about business being a good field of endeavor for college graduates. I noted throughout your presentation that you never told us who business was most attractive for. Would all college graduates find business to be more challenging and more opportune than other fields of endeavor?
No, I don't think that the die-hard history major whose sole concern is ancient Byzantine art will really find a place in business, but I think that for most college graduates, business offers the best opportunity.
I found that very interesting when you referred to the challenges, the risks, and so forth involved in business and the potentiality of failure. Now, in your first point, you talked about the fact that no one would be secure in business as one of the risks, one of the things that makes it important, correct?
I think that you have to do a good job to get promoted, yes.
All right. You said also, though, that one had to have the opportunity to fail in order to give him an incentive to go into business. This is one of the challenges, correct?
Well, if everybody succeeds, then what's the point to it?
All right. In your fifth point, when you talked about serving society, however, you will note that you said that when a businessman becomes secure, he thereby enables himself to go out and help society. How do you reconcile risk and security?
Well, in that sense, let me explain this. In that sense, I meant economic security if I didn't say so. When the businessman can afford to accept no money for the government, take $1 a year job, then he can go out and work in the slums, work for the government.
In other words, when risk has no longer that great importance in what he's doing.
Economic risk.
Economic risk. What is business? Doesn't business deal with economics, Mr. Wisner?
I think that the motivation of men, the security that can't be provided is not only economic, but it's motivational.
All right.
No man ever has his motives fully fulfilled in business.
Okay, where does a person find the greatest amount of immediate responsibility? If a person wants to find a job, he wants to be in a position where he can do something and make decisions. Does he get that very quickly in business? Or does he get it more quickly in education?
I think that he gets it more quickly in business if he can show his skills.
If he can show his skills. I think that'll be all, Mr. Wisner. Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. As a future college professor, I cannot accept the dictum implied in the resolution we are debating, that indeed business does offer a more challenging career and a career with more opportunities than do other non-business types of occupations. Now note what we are attempting to debate here, whether business is an attractive occupation for the young college graduate of today. I think you'll find that Mr. Wisner never really addressed himself to the question of what the young college graduate is looking for and whether he can find it immediately in business. And I will seek to show that as I go through what he told you and why I believe it is invalid. He told you first that an element in business was this concept of risk, the idea of success or failure. Note what this concerns. It concerns whether or not someone can make greater profits or whether he will fail in a monetary, in an economic sense. Now, I would contend that under the educational schema of society today, there is risk of a different nature. And note in cross-examination, Mr. Wisner talked about motivation as being an element of risk as well. I think one finds this in education more than any other place. Why? Because the chance of failure in education is always present. You're trying to mold young minds who will become the leaders of society, and if you fail here, you have failed in the worst way possible. You have not lost $1, you have lost a human being. I suggest that risk is significant in this area, and that education is therefore superior in this particular area rather than business. Next, the idea of challenge, the availability of challenge. Mr. Wisner told you that one can become a high executive in business and that this operates on the incentive scale. This provides someone with a reason for going into business. And even if he doesn't want to do that, even if he doesn't become a high executive, he can always engage in the idea of selling more products, improving the quality of those products, and reaching his customer more successfully. Now, Mr. Wisner then attempted to draw a rather stony picture of education for you, painting it as a rather dry area where one's analysis and one's advancement are all based on concepts of tenure, rather futile ideas of seniority, and whether or not one after the age of 30 is any longer mentally competent to teach. Whether indeed he doesn't reach his peak, and I guess Mr. Wisner would go along with those who in our generation today seem to think that life ends at 30. For most professors, it doesn't begin until 30. I think we're going to find, just examining what his juxtaposition has been here, that Mr. Wisner's analysis is failing. I asked him, where can you make decisions the quickest? Where does responsibility fall upon you the soonest? Is it in business or is it in education? Now, I note as I look around this convention that there are very few very young faces, and I suggest that that's a very important point to be made. It takes a long time to rise in the business world. You don't make important decisions overnight. You aren't immediately catapulted into an executive vice presidency. I think that this is a very crucial issue when you're trying to decide what the young college student is looking for, and that is, after all, what we're attempting to debate. As U.S. News and World Report, hardly an anti-business magazine, pointed out on January 19th of this year, the present generation is pictured as coming out of business school at a full gallop, ready to tackle anything. The fact is, however, that many young people will have to wait 10 years or more before they are permitted to make a major business decision, a point stressed by many. I suggest when one enters the educational arena, he has to begin molding minds instantaneously. Even in graduate school, when a person is a teaching assistant, he is involved in attempting to inculcate whatever he has by way of a storehouse of knowledge into the minds of those people whose mentalities are entrusted to him. I suggest on the basis of decision-making, then, crucial to people coming out of college today, that business does not provide instant opportunity and therefore is not as good as education in this arena. What about the concepts of tenure and the idea that 30 is a magic age? Does a person ever reach his peak in education? I think by the nature of the activity you would have to say no, because reaching a peak implies a static plateau, and when a teacher reaches a static plateau to his students, he is a very pathetic sight. I suggest, therefore, that one must continue to grow in education, and I advance that as my constructive position, that in the areas Mr. Wisner wants to address himself to, education, thus far in my analysis, is superior to business. What about these other ideas that Mr. Wisner talked about? Government, the ideas of serving society, and the place of business in America. I will not argue with you that government is the biggest business in the country. In fact, that may be one of the problems we face today, because it is just as difficult to rise in the governmental bureaucracy, if not more so, than it is to rise in most business corporations, and the end product of your rising is generally a lot more dismal. So I'm not going to defend government for you. But I will contend that serving society is best done by non-business corporations, private corporations as it were, or private groups like universities. And I will use a couple of examples to talk just about the things Mr. Wisner referred to in establishing my point of view. Is business really progressive today? Is it really going into the ghettos because it has a humanitarian interest in seeing people come out of the position they're in right now? I really don't think that's the case. You know, Mr. Wisner didn't tell you whether businessmen believe that's true, yet 2.5 weeks ago, the Los Angeles Times had a keynote editorial in which it pointed out very succinctly that the reason a major insurance company was going into the ghettos and attempting to insure people down there was because it was more profitable to build up the ghettos than not to build them up. I suggest the money motive plays a prime role here as well. But that is a very interesting example because it's an example of a business that is moving into society. How many young college graduates have the opportunity to involve themselves in social endeavors when they immediately enter business today? How many of you were able to get involved in society when you immediately entered the business field? I'd suggest not very many. Many businesses, rather than encouraging social change, tend to retard it because of the areas in which they operate. I turn for an example to the Crown-Zellerbach Corporation in a very controversial issue that was pointed out just 3 days ago. When the Congress of Racial Equality first approached Crown-Zellerbach regarding its operations in Bogalusa, Louisiana, the reply was, regarding their segregation policy, that we are simply adhering to local custom, and the death knell was this sentence: as a business, social change is not one of our responsibilities. I suggest that this is the image that is coming across to the college graduate of today, and that as long as this image pervades, business will not be viewed as more challenging and as more socially oriented, especially in a time such as today, when the most impressive fact on the American scene is above all other things the Negro Revolution. And it is something which all men must be concerned with, and that, I tell you, impresses a college student far more directly than any other force that is operating in society right now. What about the place of business in society? Mr. Wisner told you that business earns profits, and that this is important because profits are the wellspring of American society. I noticed he attempted to say that money in business goes for taxes, expansion, or stockholders. I guess he leaves out all the poor executives who try to run the business, but I tend to think that salary is a very important function here, and that most people who go into business are in business because of the opportunities it offers for personal power, for aggrandizement, for the opportunity to succeed in doing what business does, which is to make money. I suggest, therefore, that business's position in society is not indispensable. Why? Because you must have society to have business, and that unites my entire presentation before you. As I pointed out just a second ago, we face today a revolution in America, a revolution in the European Jacobin tradition. It's something that threatens to overturn the society, and it's something that has to be dealt with by all segments of the society. Without something to exist, without a structure, there can be no business, and the only way for business to ensure that the structure exists is to engage actively in coping with it and incorporating it into the society. I do not stand before you and condemn business. I think it serves a useful function. I suggest, however, that in this society, for the college graduate of today, who tends to be in many cases more visionary than in the past and tends to feel problems more acutely, that there are other fields of endeavor in which he might perhaps find a better place. Thank you.
You did say that business serves a useful purpose, didn't you?
Business makes money, and money is useful.
That's very generous of you. Okay. You talked about Crown Zellerback as discriminating in Louisiana, didn't you?
Well, yes, that was the example I used.
Well, doesn't the University of Louisiana discriminate?
Well, they do. By federal statute, they can't. That's being relegated now to a minor position, I would say. We have laws in the society that attempt to enforce these things in universities. I don't know whether that's extended completely to businesses or not.
Well, didn't business integrate without a Supreme Court order?
Some businesses do. Some businesses don't. The image is what counts.
Okay. Let's move on. You mentioned that you implied that the prime purpose, the prime function of a teacher was to mold young minds. Am I correct?
Well, among other things, the teaching function itself implies the molding of young minds, if that's what you're talking about.
Isn't the primary purpose of teachers to publish or perish?
You're talking about a function of teachers in the University of California, and publishing or perishing is merely a collateral function. Most teachers are so garrulous anyway that if they didn't publish, they would perish.
But doesn't that imply that publishing or doing the research to become published is going to take a lot of the teacher's time and leave very little time for him to mold young minds, as you put it?
Well, the California State Board of Education recently reported that the average teacher in the University of California system spends 52 hours a week in direct teaching activities. I suggest that if research takes a lot of the rest of his time, he gets very little sleep.
Okay, let's move on. I want to get back to my example that I gave that you referred to of that 30-year-old professor who's earned a Nobel Prize. Do you think that he has any risk in terms of losing his job once he has that Nobel Prize?
No, he doesn't have risk in terms of losing his job, but that's not an issue with a professor most of the time. He does have risk in whether that Nobel Prize implies that he can still teach students effectively or continue at the same level of mental ability that he has been showing in the past. Those are the challenges there.
Isn't that a feeling within himself rather than a feeling provided by his job at that stage?
Well, what is his job if it is not to use himself as a means for helping others? I think they're involved together in the educational sphere, and that's where you've attempted to divide things that can't be divided.
Okay, now you mentioned decision-making, and you mentioned that a TA has the decision to inculcate facts. Am I correct?
Well, yes, in a very gross verbal sense.
Okay. Does a history TA write his own facts?
Well, no, but a history teaching assistant does perform interpretations upon the facts. That's his job. That's what history teachers do.
But doesn't a history TA pretty well have to follow what the professor advises him to do?
I don't think you've been through very many history courses if you believe that.
Well, I've been in each and every one of yours, Roy.
In that case, you haven't had the same teaching assistants I have had.
Okay. Now, one more question. If business helps on the war on poverty, helps the poor, and cleans out the slums, do you have any objection to their making a profit at the same time?
I only suggest that the profit motive is first and foremost in the minds of business when they clean out the slums, that for someone who's in education or who is in something like the Peace Corps or VISTA, that social service is a primary motive. And in the sense of primary motives, I think we have to talk about whether these two areas are going to be more attractive to new graduates. What you will be doing mostly for the rest of your life must be the determining factor.
Thank you very much, Roy.
As Roy alluded to when he stood up here to address you, he is a history major and he does plan on being a professor. And I sometimes wonder whether or not Roy has brought his history right before you. He looks at education as kind of a Walden's pond, you know, where you can sit around and philosophize about the nature of life all of your living days. And he looks at business kind of as the octopus of the early 1900s, which has absolutely no social motives, no social interests, no desire to look at man. I think that Roy has brought us a rather historical image this afternoon, and I don't really think it's very relevant to the modern day and age. Roy talked to you about the image. The image is what counts, Roy tells you. It's the image which business gives out to our college graduates which is the real problem. And yet Roy, although he thought business was a very fine way to go about solving many of our problems, wants to continue that image by attacking it, by suggesting that the image is real. I wonder if he's not defeating his own purposes when he stands up before you this afternoon. I want to look specifically back towards the case which we built up for you and show you how I think up until this point in the hour there has not been any real refutation where the real opportunity lies for the college graduate. Now it might be true that certain individuals might find that they are better suited to work in the rather secluded and hidden away corner of academia. Well, if they're that type of retreating violet, maybe they belong there, maybe business doesn't want them. But the question is, where is the opportunity? The real opportunity to do the things which a man wants to do. The opportunity to earn that large salary. To have the prestige which he wants in his life. The feeling that he has accomplished something. The feeling that he can pick something up in his hands and say, this is what I've done with my life. Now I think that this type of opportunity is a very real thing. Roy juxtapositions this with another concept. The concept of molding young minds, and he talks about education, and I think Roy painted for you a rather tinted picture. He talked about education in the large universities of this country as being a situation where men, out of their own wonderful self-interest, go out simply to help young men. I think Roy was kind of pulling your leg here. What is really the case in education today in our major universities? I haven't been able to talk to one of my history professors in 4 years at UCLA because he's so busy publishing and running off to advise corporations, Roy. The fact of the matter is, despite that statistic which Roy asserted, that's not the case. The average history professor or English professor is going to teach 2 or 3 courses a week, coming to a total of 6-8 hours a week. The rest of his time is spent in giving his teaching assistants instructions on how to grade examinations and publishing his little articles. I conclude that Roy has been giving you a rather tainted picture. Now remember, we're telling you that business provides those risks. Businesses provides that chance, the challenge to really accomplish something, and this opportunity has never been denied, and I think actually we don't have a debate here. I'd like to talk just for a few more minutes about education. I want to just for a few more minutes show you why Roy has been giving you a rather tainted picture. I wonder if Roy has really been willing to look around UCLA or any of our other major universities. Several points need to be made. First, the type of teaching position which the highly motivated college graduate with a PhD wants is a teaching position not in Podunk University, but in one of the major universities in the country, of which there probably are only 20. In Roy's field, history, that probably means that there are only 20 positions open a year. Where's the opportunity in education if you have to be stunk with Podunk U? I think that's the first point to be made. Second, Roy can't get away from life at a university campus. He's got to put up with all those vile and nasty things he seems so concerned about. Campus politics are there just like they are in the big corporation. I think if we're comparing education and business, we've got to look at the reality of the situation. We've talked about publishing or perishing. We've talked about what a professor really does with his time. About government work, I guess we all agree there really isn't great opportunity there, so we'll drop that. Let's talk specifically now about serving society. Alec and I feel that the real opportunity to serve society does come in business. Now, Roy has a very telling point here, one which we must think about. What is the primary motivation of business? He comes back and very rightly says profits, as we admitted in the first constructive. He says, but the primary motivation in education is helping mold these young minds. I'd like to see a survey to that extent. I would think perhaps that the primary motivation of many individuals going into education is their own selfish self-interest. They want to put themselves up in that corner and not be bothered and be able to study their particular field. That's just as selfish a motivation, I think, as making a decent salary and raising a decent family. I'd suggest furthermore that the true motivations of education might be somewhat different. The true motivation of education is to socialize, to the process of socialization of the youngsters. You take the person and you put him in the educational environment, and the attempt here is to mold him so he'll fit into society. I don't think that the true motivation for education is as altruistic as Rory would have you to believe. And if he's only going to talk about that primary motivation, I don't think that he's talking for the majority of our college graduates who are looking for the opportunity to succeed with themselves, for the opportunity to go into the world and make their name known. We talk specifically about private corporations. Roy tells us that it's profitable to build up the ghettos, and therefore we shouldn't use this motivation for going into the ghettos. I would suggest that most of the major social advances in the past 75 years in American history have come specifically from the profit motive. Most of the inventions, most of the technology which is sitting around you gentlemen this afternoon has come about through the business corporation, through the desire to better the society and make money while you're doing it. I think Mr. Churchill's comment was relevant. I think the sign which was hung on the closed gas station is also relevant. We undersold everyone. That's not the way to run a business. Roy agreed with us that business is not indispensable. Of course it's not indispensable. The question, of course, is what is the function of business in society? Now, suppose that Claude would be to get up here in the next constructive and attack corporations, and I think there are many areas where we can attack corporations. Suppose he does this and tells us there are many reasons why we shouldn't go into business, why a college graduate shouldn't do this because it's immoral or amoral or something. But what's the conclusion? What's the best way to solve these types of problems of corporations and business? I would suggest to go into the businesses and corporations and work at it from the inside, to make the attempt to improve your society where your society is most active, i.e. within the business community itself. And this is where the advances have to be. Roy made several other points. The most significant was the one of opportunity. He says the real reason why people should go into education rather than going into business is that immediately you can be more or less at the top of your field. Even if you're a lowly teaching assistant, you can be making decisions immediately while you can't in a business corporation. All right, several points have to be made. First, the essence of opportunity is not giving somebody something on a silver platter. The advantage of being able to make these decisions is going to be that much greater. The opportunity is going to be seen that much more real. The challenge and the risk that much more significant if you have to work for it, if it's not simply given to you. Roy's right. Right now, I could teach a college course, as could either of my three colleagues debating here this afternoon. But what does that yield us for growth? Where is the challenge in this existence when from year to year you're teaching the same Byzantine history course because that subject's not changing? I conclude that the real opportunities, risks, and challenge lie in the business community. I think there can be no doubt at this point where the opportunity is. I think the only question is, what is the individual cut out for? I think it's up to the business community to make these opportunities known.
Elden, you told us that there were three major opportunities in business. If I quote you, they were to earn a salary, to gain prestige, and to pick up something off the table that is your own.
That's not what I said at all.
That's exactly what I wrote down.
Well,
Let's take them in reverse order.
you're not going to be immoral with me, are you?
Not with you, Elden. How about number three? You say it's important to pick up something off the table that you've done yourself. Do you suppose writing a book and picking that off the table is something that you've done yourself?
Yes.
Do you suppose picking up a magazine and seeing that a student of yours has succeeded is doing something?
I think it's much more something to pick up that magazine and see that you've succeeded.
Well, suppose you're credited for leading this person into a correct life, or a life where he's rewarded other people. Do you suppose that is success too, Elden?
Yes.
It is success.
But I don't see anything
What about
inherent-
prestige, Elden? May I continue? What about prestige, Elden? Now, you say you want prestige and you must go to business to get prestige. Do you think that Mr. Darwin had prestige in the 19th century? Yes or no?
No.
You don't think so?
I don't know.
You don't believe that men such as Freud and Einstein had prestige in this century?
Naturally. I mean,
What about our presidents? I suppose they have prestige as well, don't they?
Yes.
In other words, you don't have to go to business to get prestige. You just have to be successful in whatever endeavor you choose. Is that correct?
And you're not putting it in the proper framework. You can get prestige, you can get status, you can get a feeling of accomplishment anywhere. We're asking where's the greatest opportunity for this to occur? In corporations where there are hundreds of corporations available, or in the 20 universities in the country.
Now,
how many people
Eldon,
are there around who can be a Sigmund Freud?
May I do the questioning, Eldon? After all, I think it's my cross-sex period. Now, you tell us there's supposed to be greater opportunity than there is in the non-business careers. Did you ever quantify us? Did you ever compare all the possible great achievements you might make in business as opposed to the great achievements you might make in other fields?
A great man, a really great man will be great whether he goes into business education or dog catching.
Oh, I see. So you can be great no matter what business career you go into, right?
There's only one Sigmund Freud, one Charles Darwin,
well, you suppose there
one
could be
President
another one?
Johnson. Yeah.
Do you Does that mean if there was only one in the past that Elden Rosenthal can't become a great person in the future?
Thank you, Claude.
In other words, there is always opportunities to become a leader in whatever field you choose.
That's true, but we're talking about
I
the
see.
college graduate.
All right,
we're not
then.
talking about the
May I
college
continue?
prodigy.
So there are opportunities in all fields. Is that correct? There are opportunities in all fields. Therefore, we conclude that the question is not does business offer greater opportunities, but just can the person achieve in whatever field he desires to go into?
You conclude that. I would never conclude that. The greater opportunities lie in business for the most number of people, and specifically for our college graduates. A great man will be great anywhere. We can't argue that.
All right,
Claude,
then.
you've got a great future.
Thank you very much. I've debated with Eldon quite a while, and you see he thinks I'm pretty great, and I hope to show it in this speech. First, I'm going to take a look at some of the things that Eldon said and show you how ridiculous they were. He told you want to earn a salary, but I don't think Eldon would tell you that money above everything else, that you should take some kind of job you don't like or would hate to do just for money. He tells you about earning prestige, yet he admits you can earn prestige in other fields. He tells you about accomplishing something for yourself, and I suggest you can accomplish more for yourself if you write a book or you teach a student than if you make money for the stockholder and it isn't your own. I suggest these opportunities exist outside. Then he tells you that his history professor doesn't talk to him. Of course, Eldon ignores the fact that most UCLA students know that every history professor has office hours. I think Eldon was just too lazy to go and see him during that time. What about education? Eldon tells you education is really bad. Well, why? He says there are only a small number of positions, and everywhere else except the top 20 are podunk U. Now, wait a minute. For some person that really wants to go to Harvard or to UCLA, I suppose there are a limited number of positions. But many people, such as Roy, want to teach, and there are students everywhere in this country at thousands of colleges, and they will teach anywhere, and I don't think there's any problem with small state colleges. He tells you about the politics involved in some of these academic endeavors, yet he ignores the fact that in general, if you want to succeed as a sociologist, for example, you have to do good sociology, and if you want to succeed as a teacher among your students, you have to be a good teacher, and I don't think politics plays half the role it does in other fields. Then he tells you, well, you know, the reason people go into education is they're basically selfish. It's their self-interest. Well, I thought Eldon said earning money was pretty good, and that's self-interest too. I don't think there's any problem here. But what about all the people that go and teach school children, not only universities, but teach little kids in kindergarten and on the way up? I think they are also concerned with teaching young people molding minds, as my colleague said, and I think that's a noble cause, and that's a cause you can get in education, but I don't believe you can get in business. Finally, Eldon tells you that profit built society, and business is what built this nation. Business built our great cars. Business also built our smog. What about this issue of the importance of business? Will Eldon ever tell you that the important thing about America is its material wealth? I don't think so. What built the real system in America? What built the philosophy of America? Democracy? It wasn't business, it was philosophy. What built our social system? I think it was these other areas. Business is vital, but so are these other areas. Man does not live by bread alone, which means some of you go out and make the bread and the rest of us will help you think a little. I think that's not meant to degrade anyone or to insult anyone, but simply to say each has his role. Each has his role in society. And it is just as important to make bread perhaps, but it's also important to do the other things in society. All right, I wish to make the argumentation, and I think the argumentation deals with why college graduates don't go into business, many college graduates. Now, many college graduates do go into business, but we're not concerned with those. Eldon is perfectly right. These people want to make money, or these people like the competitive life of business, and that's all, and that's pretty good. What about these people who don't want to go into business right now? They are the ones we're concerned about, and I think I'd like to present the argument why these people don't go into business, and inherently business cannot attract these people. First, these college graduates are interested in self-actualization. What do I mean by self-actualization? They pursue certain interests and certain talents that they have developed before they've graduated from college. For example, let's take the people sitting up on this podium. My colleague Roy is interested in molding young minds in the subject of history. That is what he's interested in doing. That's what he'd like to spend his life doing because he's interested in history for itself and teaching people for itself. What about me? I'm interested in investigating sociological theory and basic sociological research. I'm not that interested in teaching. But the point is this, I'm interested in this, I'm curious in this, my talents lie in this area, and I just like to spend the career kind of investigating these ideas. What about Alec? Alec hasn't quite decided yet, but he likes debate, and I suggest he can coach debate in the university. I don't think there's that many opportunities in business. What about Eldon? Well, I once had a talk with Eldon, and Eldon said he didn't like people like me. He didn't like people who wanted knowledge for its own sake. Is this sabotage, by the way? He said he didn't like people who wanted knowledge for its own sake. He thought that if you got knowledge, you should use it to help people. Now, what does Eldon want to do? He wants to become a lawyer. And I guess if he wants to use that knowledge to help people, he can probably help more people by helping a poor person who needs legal counsel, helping Negroes deprived of their civil rights. I think he can help more people that way than helping some corporation save a little bit money on its taxes. In other words, you take a look at what each of us is really interested in doing, and we're interested in self-actualization. All right, my second point of analysis is this. Business is interested in making a profit, and I suggest no one in this room is going to deny this. You're a successful businessman if your business turns a good profit, and you're a failure if your business goes under. Time magazine last week ran a page in its business section listing all the people that had made over $150 million. It's successful in business to make money. The goal of business is to make money, and we suggest there's nothing wrong in that. But the third point is this, that these two interests I've talked about are discordant. For the college graduates which we are concerned about, such as Roy and such as myself, who are not going to go into business, we are interested in these self-actualizing things, these things, sociology, just for curiosity's sake, or the teaching of minds. Business is interested in making money, and these two things just can't go along together. Why? If Roy and I were to go into management, well, right away we couldn't do what we were interested in. I couldn't piddle around with sociological experiments when I'm supposed to do a job selling a company's product. So I suggest in that field we couldn't do it. What about certain special fields where you could do it? For instance, chemists can engage in research in chemistry in certain business organizations. I suggest even here it's limited, because sooner or later you have to produce so that the company profits on what you're doing. You can't engage in some abstract theory which you might want to do. So there's a conflict here. Could business accommodate itself to my desires? I don't think so. I think I'd be a poor investment for any businessman if I were to engage my time in doing what I like to do. All right then, what's the argument I'm making? The college graduates that we're worried about, or that the gentlemen who recruit for businesses are worried about, are interested in many things, but not interested in the type of careers business gives. They're interested in sociology. They're interested in teaching. They're interested in helping other people. And these outside of business can be achieved only. What is my conclusion? Business already has those persons who are interested in making money or in the competitive life which business provides. But business cannot provide what these other college graduates want. Therefore, business does not provide the opportunities. Because when you speak of opportunities, it's opportunities to do what? For Roy and I, the opportunities to do something which we like, and that doesn't exist in business.
I'd like to get back for a minute, Claude, to the question of opportunity and what we mean by opportunity. First of all, let me ask you this question. What percentage of today's college graduating seniors with a bachelor's degree can ever move on and get a doctorate?
Well, at the University of California, over 50% of its graduates go on to graduate school. That's the only statistic I have
And
to
what
have
percent
at the
of
moment.
those finish graduate school?
I don't know, Eldon.
Would you say approximately half?
I'll accept that because
All right,
it's
so-
your guess as well as mine.
Okay, so let's say therefore that 1/4 of today's college graduates have the capabilities of picking up an advanced graduate degree.
But you know, you don't need an advanced graduate degree, let's say, to teach in elementary school.
That's right.
Or
That's
even
true.
in certain colleges, they'll take teaching
What is the
personnel.
predominant sex of the elementary school teachers in America?
I would guess female.
Why?
Why? Because it's a nice career for a woman.
It's a nice career for a woman. Were you
And
the one that wanted me to teach?
women are over 50% of the American population. So, Eldon, you've left out half your college graduates already.
Would you say that business is a nice career for men? Or
For
boys?
those, I'm sure once you get into business, you have to become a man pretty quickly. But I think,
And how long an incubation period do you have in a university?
can I answer your question?
Yeah.
And I think for certain people, business is perfect, and I think they contribute through business. But for the people we're concerned about, those which are not going into business now, and we want to know why aren't they going into business, I've told you, because that type of career just doesn't appeal to them.
Would you be interested in working for a corporation who finances your research?
If I had complete freedom over the type of research I could do, yes.
If you had, what would be the salary you would want to have to be able to do this? Would it have to be a competitive salary? Would any salary be all right?
If I had a lot of freedom, I suppose I'd take a little cut in salary.
$5,000 a year?
I probably could get more than that in education, Ellen. A lot
Oh,
more.
do you have a profit motive in where you work?
If I can answer that, Eldon, let me make the answer here. Long ago, Eldon, when people had to take any job just to stay alive, everybody had to go into a business of some sort.
Yeah, now we can get
But
wealthy.
today, the thing is that you can go into education and stay alive and stay half decently well-clothed and well-fed. Therefore, we can concern ourselves with other things.
Well, I'm asking you why you wouldn't take a job at $5,000. How about if we guarantee you in-kind services? We'll guarantee you a nice house, clothes on your back, and food for your family. Would you be willing to work in an industry which would allow you to just do whatever you wanted?
If the freedom the industry offered and the time for research were substantially greater than that in the university, yes.
You would have no desire to increase your income throughout the course of your life if your needs
If
stayed
it
the same.
did not interfere with what I was mainly interested
Right.
in.
Now you want complete freedom of investigation, right? Do you want any
Not
type?
with,
Right. Do you
don't
want
exaggerate.
any type of control on your research work is going to impinge on your freedom, right?
Yes,
Do you want to have the freedom not to do that research work if you want to take off?
yes,
Do you want to have the freedom to publish something that would be contrary to U.S. philosophy?
yes, and you can do that working in a university.
You want the freedom to publish findings of any kind, of any nature, and of any scope?
You're more likely to be able to do that at a university than in a business.
I suggest you move into limbo.
I want to return to some of my original remarks. I think I'm going to be able, by the end of my 4 minutes here, to show you that indeed the kind of world that Claude and I envision for people of our stamp is a better world for us and for society than business would be, in spite of everything that both Eldon and Alec have attempted to tell you throughout the course of this debate. The one thing I want to consider primarily has to do with the concept of the ivory tower that Eldon seemed to think both Claude and I were so desirous of. I suggest that Eldon himself is not quite so ignorant of the fact that universities are involved in society to need any further enlightenment. And I suggest that the fact that my political science professor comes in stoned 1 or 2 days a week from lack of sleep because he's been down in Watts working with the Negroes suggests that the university is not insulated from the needs and the problems of society either. And I suggest that Ellen's analysis, therefore, has been totally narrow, has presumed that the educator of today is living in an ivory tower, which is totally false. Did he ever respond to the concept that business tends to retard social change in some instances, or that it subsumes social change to the profit motive? I didn't hear any argument. But what are Claude and I telling you? That a person decides what his life will be determined by according to the central philosophy of whatever endeavor he eventually will enter. The central philosophy of business is to gain profit. The central philosophy of education or of service is to serve society or to mold minds or to self-actualize oneself, as Claude pointed out. It is these central dynamics to which we must refer. It is these central dynamics that Eldon chose to ignore. What about the idea of making decisions? Eldon attempted to tell you, yes, it takes a long time in business, but it's fulfilling because of the time that it takes. But what are we talking about? We're talking about the business schools of this country whose courses today seem oriented toward producing high executives. When these students get out into business, they find that they are taught things for which they have no use because they are placed on the lower echelons of the executive sphere, and it takes them a long time to reach the top. By the time they have reached the top, they have become disillusioned, or if they haven't become disillusioned, it has been a long and very hard fight. In education, the teaching assistant does mold minds. I do want to get rid of one concept. Molding minds does not imply imparting dogma. Molding minds means teaching people how to cope with a society, teaching them how to think. I assure you I will not be an ivory tower historian. I only would teach my subject because I believe that it would make better citizens out of those whom I am teaching and would improve our society. You know, I never heard Eldon respond to the fact that business may be vital, but that without a primary society, without society first, there could be no business, because without society, there couldn't be humanity as we know it in this country. I think, therefore, that the basic points we brought out are still very important. Sure, an educator must publish. I regard that not as an onerous responsibility, but something that we take delight in, because in this way we spread our knowledge beyond the immediacy of our students. And I suggested in cross-examination that most professors would like to do that anyway. Yes, we do mold minds and enable people to cope with society. That's what the university offers. Does the profit motive imply that technology will advance more than does education? I suggest that atomic energy was not developed within the confines of a corporation, nor that Thomas Edison required business incentives to develop all of the some 200 inventions that he produced. I suggest that major revolutions in society, other than the Industrial Revolution, have not stemmed from business, and that therefore is no argument at all. I sum up my position with a statement by Henry Steele Commager, a professor of history indeed. Since the university, the corporate personification of the scholar today, is almost the only institution that exists to serve and safeguard the interest of mankind and of future generations, if it is distracted from its true task, that task may go by default. And that is our position in this debate.
You know, in the last 20 minutes, I've been looking out in the audience trying to spot Simon Legree, who, according to what I've heard from Roy and Claude, seems to still be running business, but I guess that he died in the Civil War, and so did a lot of the practices that Roy and Claude were talking about. The point I want to make is very simple. Businessmen are people. Now, contrary to what Claude said, I'm considering a career in law, and there's a good chance that I'll become involved in business within the next 10 years, and I don't feel money hungry. Although, admittedly, I prefer the cash to be in my pocket than in yours. The point is very simple, though, that just as the average bricklayer sits at his breakfast table drinking coffee in the morning, reading the newspaper, and being concerned about civil rights, being concerned about the atom bomb, being concerned about the problems that face each and every one of us, I'm concerned, and I'm sure that all of you are concerned. I'll say that all people are concerned, and that's the social motive which moves businessmen. That's the social motive behind business. I'll say that applies to everybody, and no matter where profits stand, whether a business makes money or doesn't, the people are still concerned about society, and business is still going to move in that direction, and I think that Claude ought to consider that in his last rebuttal before he brings his argument back up again. What about opportunity? remember what Claude told you during his speech, or during the cross-ex of Eldon. He said, well, can't I get the same feeling from picking a book up off the table that I wrote myself? Well, I'll just turn to Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, who said that if you copy anything out of one book, it's plagiarism. If you copy it out of 2 books, it's research. If you copy it out of 6 books, you're a professor, Claude. And I think that he ought to keep that in mind. Claude went a step further and said, well, you know, some people like competition, and these people should enter business. Others don't like competition. Does he want them to enter the world of the university? Well, Claude, let me open your eyes and tell you something. There's competition at the university. In the speech department at UCLA, for example, perhaps there'll only be 1 job open next year, and there'll be 3 people who want it. Now, they've got to compete to get that job. That's competition. The man who doesn't like competition ought to raise snails, I guess, because there isn't too much competition in that industry. But when you turn to the university or any major any major establishment in the American system, you have competition, and it can't be avoided no matter what Claude Fisher tells you. But I want to get to another comment Claude made during this rebuttal. Remember what Claude told you. He said that he wants to work for the university. He wants complete freedom of choice because, to quote Claude, I like to piddle around in sociology. Well, you'd better piddle quickly, Claude, and you'd better piddle in a pretty lucrative field because you're going to have to publish or perish if you're at the university. I think you'll have to consider that when exercising that freedom of choice you seem so enamored with. And then Claude, as a sociologist, admitted right here in front of you that he likes money. Remember that profit motive? He won't take $5,000 for business because the university is going to pay him more, and I think that's an important issue. Money is important. Money talks. Claude's a sociologist, so he might be interested in what a sociological authority has to say. Albert Louderback of Sarah Lawrence College. In the conventional scale of social values, money and financial gain symbolize personal assertion. Ownership of money is interpreted as the best, if not the only way to mobility, independence, and indirectly, security. Money does talk, Claude. I think it's important. Claude said it himself. Business offers more money as a matter of things. But let's talk about what we originally said in the first affirmative speech, what our case has been today. Remember, first we told you business offers more opportunity. They offer more risk, more challenge. Now, Roy came back up here and he referred to Professor Robert Wall. That's the history professor he was talking about, who found a great challenge working down in Watts. That's very nice for Professor Wall. But remember that he's secure in his job as a professor at UCLA. There's no risk involved in his status, and the challenge he's getting does not come from his job as a professor. It comes from Watts. Anybody can go down to Watts and find that challenge. It does not reside in the university. That's not the opportunity offered by education. Keep that in mind. Business does offer more risk because you have to produce in the business world. It offers a constant challenge because there's no limit to the heights you can reach. Remember what I told you, that the professor in the university, once he's gotten his full professorship, once he's gotten his books published, has that modicum of security, and security precludes risk. Opportunities are not maximized in the business world. And what about money? Remember, the big issue here that we mentioned at the end of our constructive was money itself, and remember that money finances everything else. Now, I'm glad that Professor Wall works down in Watts and is doing a lot of good there. But the reason he's doing it is because he works at UCLA. And the reason he works at UCLA is because the government finances the university. And the reason the government finances the university is because they raise taxes, and they get the taxes from the business corporations of America. That's who's behind everything. That's who's behind the government, behind education. I think that without business, we don't have too much to look forward to in education or in government. And with that, I'll leave you.
In summarizing the negative position, let me first do away with some peripheral issues. First, the insults on me. Alec told you that if you copy out of 6 books, you're a professor. Yes, but you're not a very good professor, and you're a failure as a professor, therefore, and I don't think you will achieve, and I think we'll go further than that. Then he tells you, secondly, if I become a professor, I have to publish or perish. Well, you know, I've published already, and I found it the most rewarding experience of my life, and I think I'd like to do it voluntarily. Third, the gentleman tells you that money talks, and indeed it does. But what did I say in the cross-ex? What did I say in my first stand upon the floor? In today's society, you can make money in other fields, and that's good, and that's great, and that's why you can't get some of these college graduates, because now that our society is affluent enough, people can do what they're interested in doing, and they don't have to worry about where the next dollar is going to come from. All right, then he told you, look, he said everybody's concerned with social problems, not only the history professor at UCLA. Yes, but I think it's primarily people in these other fields that can do something about social problems. If you're an employee of the business, your first loyalty is to the corporation to make sure that you perform your role in the corporation which is to help it succeed and make a profit. But if you're in education, your primary role is to mold young minds, to teach people, and you can go down to Watts and teach in a ghetto school there and help society at the same time as you're pulling your salary check. You can also take off time from a university. You can join Peace Corps, you can join VISTA, you can join the government and become an employee of the Office of Economic Opportunity, and there, as directly, as part of your job, you are involved in society. However, when you're in business, your first loyalty is to the corporation. And what is its goal? Its goal is to succeed as a corporation, to make money. It's the issue that my colleague brought up. What is the primary purpose? The primary purpose of business is to make money, but the primary purpose of many college graduates is to do other things. All right, then let's get to a couple basic issues remaining. First, remember some of the things that my colleague told you. He said you have to look at what the central purpose is. Business has great effects. Business did help build this country and continues to build it. But the question is, what does a person want to spend his career doing as a central concern of his career? The opportunity to do those things do not exist in business. What about making decisions? I don't think the gentleman came back to that issue, but you can make decisions immediately when you enter these non-business careers. What about social concern? Well, I discussed that before. Social concern can be at heart, the implicit center of your job outside of business. But in business, it can only take this back seat. What about the issues that I brought up? Let me boil them down into two. First, is business good? Is business good or is business bad? We never said business was bad. Business is great, and it offers great opportunities for many, if not most, of our college graduates, for many, if not most, of the American people. But what are we worried about? We're worried about those college graduates who today do not go into business. Those like Alec and Eldon, if he sacrifices what he once told me, will go into business, and all the good luck I wish to them. But what about these people who don't want to go into business? The issue is, why don't they want to go into business? Are they wrong when they turn away from business, or are they right? I suggested they're right, and I gave you the threefold analysis. What was the first point? That these college graduates are interested in these personal things. They're interested in spending their life teaching people. They're interested in spending their life doing research. They're interested in spending their life coaching debate, as Alec I think will turn out anyway. These are their interests. What are the interests of business? To succeed in what it was meant to do, to be true to itself, which is to make a profit. For the people working in business, there aren't opportunities to teach young children in business. There aren't opportunities to go out and change the world in business. Thus, for people who are concerned about these things, the college graduates that I think many of you gentlemen are worrying about, the opportunities don't exist in business, and it may be unfortunate, but at least we have these other fields where people can go out and use their God-given talents in many ways and in many shapes to help themselves and to help others. And I think we should be thankful that not only are there business careers, but that these are opportunities outside of business. And I think for the people we're worried about, those are the greater opportunities.
If I could get a little bit soft-hearted here for a second, I was a little bit upset about what Claude concluded by saying. And I think that Claude is taking around that mistaken image which Roy talked about initially in the presentation. He said there simply isn't the opportunity in the business community to change the world. And I must suggest that this is completely false, and I think Claude knew it when he said it. The opportunity is within the individual to do what he can within whichever organization he goes into to change the world. And the real men that are doing the most to change the world right now, the governors Romney, and the Kerrs and Hitches who run the University of California, are all graduates of business, and I think Claude was somewhat painting an overly dark picture there. He said that only the profit motive interests the business. I would suggest, of course, primarily this is true. But IBM goes into Bedford-Stuyvesant and puts up a plant and doesn't expect to make it a profit initially. Initially, they're interested in the community. Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors goes into the Detroit area after the riots to help put these people to work because the President and the Congress has asked business to go into these areas, and business does it, not expecting an immediate profit. Even business can put off its profit for a moment when society truly calls, and I think that Claude was painting a somewhat mistaken picture. You know, I must intersperse here with a quick line which I remembered while I was sitting at my desk. I don't remember exactly who said it. It went something like this: them that can does, them that can't teaches. And And I somewhat wonder to what degree those of my colleagues that graduate UCLA and go into the education field are a little bit worried about the risk and the challenge opportunity offered by the business world. I would suggest that the true factor we're talking about, the opportunity in life to do the most that you possibly can do within the profession, lies within business, and I don't think that the gentlemen have really disagreed with it. They've told us about specific individuals who have been great men. We had a sort of uproarious cross-examination period about that. And they've told us about specific history professors they knew that took their time off and went down into the community to help with the community work. That's fine. A businessman can do that also within his own self, within his own time. But we're talking specifically about the profession and what a man wants out of his life. Now, Claude says, well, I guess most elementary school teachers are women because that's a woman's job. That's correct. Because the man's job is not only to satisfy himself, but to have a family and raise a family and support that family in a reasonable manner, and you can't do that teaching elementary school, and that's a fact of life. The point is, except in those major universities, except for the truly top college graduates, the opportunity to earn the fine salary, the opportunity to really do something, in the greater instance, will lie with the business corporation of today. That's why we conclude in the large sense when we're talking about opportunity, I think we really are talking about business. Now, the specific individuals standing and debating this afternoon shouldn't get colored in with the debate, although of course we have. But the point of the matter is though I really wouldn't expect my two very close friends to go into industry because they're not cut out for that type of career, as they both told you. And I don't say that's wrong. I simply say that for the basic college graduate, the man who wants the opportunity to succeed, the greater opportunity will lie in business. Now, I want to conclude with a very significant point, I think. Roy told you that the image of business is the problem, and I'm going to have to agree. Alec and I seem to feel that opportunity does lie with business. But obviously, we wouldn't be debating this subject in front of all of you gentlemen this afternoon if there wasn't a problem with college graduates. Obviously, there's a problem. Obviously, business has to do something. And I only see a few possible alternatives. Either it can, on the one hand, continue on its present course of action, but that's only going to make the problem worse, and you're going to have to continue having these debates and not get anywhere. Or you could increase the amount of opportunity. But the opportunity isn't the crucial fact either, obviously, because the gentleman agreed with us that there is opportunity in business. What's the problem with business hiring top college graduates? I think it's just what Roy said, it's the image. And I think the only alternative left for business is to go right to the college people. Not when they graduate, but when they're undergraduates, and get to the undergraduates and change that image. Now that can be done through colloquiums on campus with businessmen and college undergraduate leaders. It can be done by extending your summer work programs to give good jobs to qualified college undergraduates so that they can do something and destroy this image. I conclude that the debate we've had for you this afternoon really isn't that meaningful in the context of the resolution. The opportunity is here and we all know it's here. The point is, what is business to do with its image? I suggest the alternatives are clear, and it's business's responsibility now to make these opportunities known. Thank you.